In 1987, Edward Bennett, a respected CIA agent known for his meticulous nature and mysterious habits, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only his empty car near the iconic Bixby Creek Bridge. For 28 years, his disappearance haunted the town, an unsolved mystery wrapped in silence. But when his long-forgotten car suddenly reappears on a secluded beach, corroded by decades beneath the sea, a new investigation begins, uncovering hidden letters, secret meetings, and truths darker than anyone imagined. Why did Edward Bennett disappear? What secrets did he carry with him? And how deep does the truth truly go? Monterey woke each morning as if emerging reluctantly from a dream, shrouded in the slow embrace of a sea mist that crept through its winding streets and down to the lonely shores. Here, memories clung to buildings like ivy, quietly resilient, whispering to those who paused to listen. It was a town of delicate contrasts, rusted fishing boats rocking gently alongside luxurious yachts, weathered cottages nestled near elegant Victorian homes, and silence interrupted only by the murmur of waves and the distant cries of gulls. Monterey wore its melancholy with grace, like an old widow wrapped in a favorite shawl, comforted by the familiar weight of sorrow. It was in this quiet world of secrets and salt air that Edward Bennett lived his carefully ordered life. Edward was not a man who believed in chaos. He wore his control like a finely tailored suit, crisp, deliberate, and immaculate. At 40, his hair was prematurely dusted with silver, his eyes often hidden behind reflective sunglasses, his face a map of quiet intelligence. Colleagues whispered behind his back, amused yet admiring, about his meticulous nature, the way his desk never showed a trace of disorder, how he meticulously polished his shoes every evening, or his peculiar collection of Cuban cigars, kept at precisely 70 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity unwavering at 68%. Edward's peculiarities extended beyond mere habits. He was an enigmatic soul who, during moments of tension or contemplation, recited poetry softly, as if drawing strength, or calm from verses crafted long before his birth. At the office, amid the hushed secrecy of CIA dealings, Edward's voice sometimes drifted through doors slightly ajar, quoting T.S. Eliot or William Butler Yeats, mystifying colleagues who dismissed it as harmless eccentricity. But Edward knew better. Poetry was his anchor in a world defined by shadows and whispered truths. His days followed predictable rhythms, orchestrated with quiet precision. Morning coffee at exactly 6:15, accompanied by a leisurely scan of the day's paper, particularly the crossword puzzle, completed with a fine silver pen. Then the careful drive along winding coastal roads to his discreet office, nestled inconspicuously amid local businesses in downtown Monterey. By dusk, he returned to Lauren, his graceful, gentle wife, keeper of his vulnerabilities and the silent guardian of his few unguarded smiles. Their evenings were calm and warm, dinner accompanied by quiet conversation, soft music, and the rhythmic sound of the ocean outside. But even the most meticulously ordered lives can unravel without warning, as swiftly and silently as fog rolling in from the sea. On the morning of June 14, 1987, Edward woke earlier than usual, leaving Lauren asleep. Something in his routine faltered, a subtle hesitation, a barely noticeable tremor of uncertainty in his movements. His reflection in the mirror paused him momentarily, his eyes darkened with a quiet, unfamiliar apprehension. Still, he dressed precisely, knotted his tie with practiced ease, took one long glance around the familiar comforts of home, and stepped out into the mist-covered dawn. He climbed into his black sedan, a car as nondescript as its owner, and drove steadily towards the office. But Edward Bennett would never arrive. Somewhere near the iconic Bixby Creek Bridge, nestled precariously among cliffs and restless ocean waves, his carefully ordered world fractured. The car was later found empty, engine cold, keys still dangling from the ignition. Driver's door swung open wide as if inviting the mysteries in. Edward Bennett had vanished. The news spread swiftly through Monterey, carried on whispers and looks exchanged at market stalls and cafes. Edward had always been a quiet presence in town, respected yet distant, someone known by reputation rather than intimacy. And yet his disappearance ignited curiosity, concern, and countless speculations, each more elaborate than the last. His colleagues arrived swiftly, men in sharp suits with careful expressions, sweeping methodically through the small town, searching for clues, speaking softly into radios, their quiet urgency a strange intrusion in Monterey's tranquil rhythms. Local police joined the search with hesitance, their faces betraying uncertainty amid federal authority, stepping carefully through the fog, combing beaches, forests, and cliffs. Divers scoured the ocean beneath the Bixby Bridge, finding only driftwood, seaweed, and discarded hopes. Townspeople watched, uncertain, gathering in small clusters along streets, nodding solemnly as black sedans passed by. The search continued, meticulous yet fruitless, a rhythm of hope slowly fading into a resigned acceptance of mystery. But none felt the impact more profoundly than Lauren Bennett. The news arrived gently, as terrible news always does, delivered by a young CIA agent with eyes full of reluctant pity and respectful sorrow. Lauren listened quietly, her face composed, her hands tightly gripping the edges of a table once carefully chosen by Edward during happier days. Only after the young man departed did Lauren allow herself to crumble. She wept silently in the dimming daylight, her tears mingling with the salt air, carrying the weight of unanswered questions and the bitter uncertainty of loss. For Lauren, Edward had never been a mystery, but a puzzle lovingly pieced together. From moments shared in quiet laughter, whispered secrets beneath starlit skies, and a profound mutual understanding. Now, suddenly, inexplicably, the puzzle had been scattered, fragments of a life once whole, now painfully out of reach. Days passed with agonizing slowness. Monterey continued its quiet routines, waves whispering soothingly as townspeople returned gradually to normalcy, each aware yet respectfully silent about the Bennett tragedy. Lauren remained secluded, emerging only briefly, her gentle grace touched now by sorrow's delicate veil. Weeks blurred into months, Edward's absence becoming quietly normalized, an accepted uncertainty lingering beneath the surface of daily life. The CIA eventually withdrew discreetly, their presence becoming a fading memory, as intangible as Edward himself. Yet some mysteries linger, stubbornly refusing resolution. On certain evenings, locals claim to feel something different. In the mist, a sense of waiting or watching, an intangible presence that unsettled and intrigued. Stories emerged of sightings near the cliffs, whispers of shadows moving silently along moonlit beaches. These were dismissed as imagination and grief-fueled fantasies, Monterey's own poetic attempt at closure, a ghostly echo of their missing neighbor. On a final evening of that long, uncertain summer, as dusk spread gently across the ocean, the abandoned car of Edward Bennett sat untouched beneath the Bixby Creek Bridge. The fading sunlight painted its black exterior in soft tones of purple and gold, giving it an almost ethereal presence. Slowly, steadily, Monterey's ever-present mist began to roll inward from the sea, enveloping cliffs, forests, and roads, inching toward the car in quiet determination. And as darkness swallowed the last glimmers of day, a solitary figure stood motionless in the distance, obscured by mist and shadow, watching silently as Edward Bennett's car vanished from sight, consumed entirely by the relentless fog, as if the world itself had decided to reclaim the secret it guarded so closely. Somewhere beneath the quiet hush of ocean waves, hidden by the gentle whisper of trees, Monterey continued breathing softly, holding its breath just a little longer, knowing, deep within its bones, that some mysteries were never meant to remain forever lost. Monterey had changed very little over the years, its soul held gently in place by the slow rhythms of the Pacific. Time moved quietly here, respecting the careful boundaries of the past, as though reluctant to disturb the delicate balance of memories that still whispered softly through the streets. Even now, in 2015, the town's mornings remained cloaked in a cool mist, a ghostly embrace that wrapped the buildings in an unbroken spell, Comforting yet solemn. It was beneath this eternal veil of fog that a young photographer, Liam Hayes, wandered along the rugged coastline, capturing the untamed beauty that drew tourists and dreamers alike. Liam had always loved the solitude of Monterey's shores, where silence spoke louder than any voice, and where the ocean whispered secrets older than time. But this morning, as he made his way carefully among the slippery rocks near the restless surf, Liam discovered something that tore violently through the tranquility he cherished. Nestled awkwardly between jagged stones and washed by the tides lay the twisted metal frame of an old, rusted car, its windows shattered, paint peeled away, the tires long vanished into nothingness. Liam approached cautiously, his pulse quickening with curiosity. He felt an eerie presence as he moved closer, noticing faded letters on a rusted license plate. His camera trembled slightly as he captured images of the abandoned relic, unaware that he had just reopened a wound Monterey had quietly carried for 28 years. Within days, the discovery reached the small Monterey Police Department. Detective Dylan Carter sat behind a cluttered desk, his chair leaned precariously back, feet propped on a pile of neglected paperwork. Dylan was in his early 30s, a man whose perpetual optimism and slightly disheveled appearance made him instantly likable. He often joked that solving cases was like baking pies, messy at first, but delicious once you figured out all the ingredients. Dylan had a knack for easing tensions, his humor always bubbling gently, even when confronted by darker truths. His partner, Detective Emma Cruz, was Dylan's perfect contrast, disciplined, practical, and methodical. Emma's desk was meticulously tidy, punctuated only by an impressive collection of cacti she affectionately named and watered sparingly. Her sharp eyes often narrowed in skepticism or mild annoyance. Emma frequently joked that cacti made excellent partners. They required very little attention, never argued back, and thrived under harsh conditions. Her dry wit balanced Dylan's buoyant charm perfectly, making their partnership both effective and warmly entertaining. The news about the Kingdons, about the discovered car intrigued them both deeply. Dylan spun theories, suggesting everything from accidental misplacement to supernatural intervention, while Emma countered logically, emphasizing the real challenge ahead, identifying the car and tracing its origins. Soon enough, confirmation arrived. The vehicle was indeed the long-missing sedan of Edward Bennett, the enigmatic CIA agent who vanished without explanation nearly 3 decades earlier. Together, Dylan and Emma began sifting through the layers of history, carefully peeling back the dusty veil that had settled over the cold case. Their first stop was Lauren Bennett's small, elegant bookstore, nestled in a quiet corner of town. Lauren, now gracefully aged, yet retaining an air of quiet dignity, welcomed them cautiously. Her bookstore smelled warmly of polished wood and old pages, filled with shelves of rare literature and forgotten poetry, preserving the world Edward had cherished. Lauren spoke softly, offering fragments of memories. Edward's calmness, his dedication, and his unfathomable disappearance that shattered her world. She recalled how Edward used to read poetry aloud, pacing their home on stormy evenings, his voice a soothing balm against the tempest. Yet, when pressed gently for new insights or hidden secrets, Lauren could only shake her head, eyes glistening slightly, insisting she had long shared everything she knew. Feeling somewhat defeated, yet understanding her fragility, Dylan and Emma left quietly, moving onward to their next lead, George Ramsay's bar. The Salty Mariner stood resolute along the waterfront, weather-beaten and unapologetically rustic. Inside, old ship parts adorned the walls, interspersed with faded nautical charts and vintage photographs of Monterey's maritime heritage. George Ramsay himself stood behind the polished mahogany counter, his thick beard now fully white, but eyes still sharp with guarded intelligence. Ramsay greeted Dylan and Emma with polite reserve, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of whiskey and sea air. Over steaming cups of black coffee, he recounted stories of Edward's steadfast nature, his dedication to duty, and cryptically, his deep-rooted mistrust towards unseen threats. Ramsey's evasiveness frustrated Emma, who pressed him firmly, eliciting only vague responses about loyalty, sacrifice, and the weight of secrets. Outside the bar, Dylan and Emma paused, breathing the salty breeze deeply, both sensing that they were grasping at threads frayed by time. Monterey seemed reluctant to yield its secrets, holding on to the past fiercely, like a parent shielding a beloved child from harsh truths. Dylan sighed dramatically, quipping about pies needing more time to bake, prompting Emma to roll her eyes. With practice tolerance, days passed as they interviewed local residents, fishermen, shopkeepers, each offering nothing substantial, only stories, blurred by rumor and imagination. The investigation felt increasingly frustrating, a cycle of dead ends and polite silence. Dylan remained positive, infusing their work with levity and reassurance, while Emma, ever practical, meticulously documented every detail, hoping the pattern might reveal itself. It was during another visit to Ramsey's bar, late on a cloudy afternoon, that Dylan's eye caught an old photograph tucked unobtrusively behind the counter. Intrigued, he asked Ramsey for a closer look, and the old man hesitated briefly before reluctantly handing it over. The photograph, yellowed by age and blurred by time, showed Edward Bennett and Ramsey seated at this very bar, smiling slightly, their camaraderie obvious. Dylan flipped the image carefully in his hand, noticing faint writing on the back. Turning the photo fully, Dylan felt a chill ripple through him as he deciphered the faded handwriting. The words were cryptic, barely legible. Trust no tide, trust no shadow. The truth waits beneath the waves. Dylan's playful demeanor faded, replaced by a sudden seriousness. He discreetly slipped the photograph into his pocket, exchanging a cautious glance with Emma, who, sensing his shift, merely raised an eyebrow in silent inquiry. They left Ramsey's bar in thoughtful silence, each pondering the significance of Edward's enigmatic warning. Dylan's usual humor softened, replaced by cautious reflection. Emma, perceptive as always, remained calm, aware that their journey had taken a decisive turn toward something far deeper and more dangerous than anticipated. As evening settled once more over Monterey, the mist thickening gently, Dylan stared out across the ocean, the photograph's cryptic words echoing in his mind. He knew instinctively they had uncovered something important, a clue left deliberately hidden, awaiting discovery. The waves crashed softly below, relentless and unending, a constant reminder that beneath their serene surface lay unseen depths and truths yet to emerge. In the quiet that followed, Dylan whispered softly, almost to himself, "The truth waits beneath the waves." Emma looked at him, her eyes sharp, resolute, knowing they had just stepped closer to the heart of a decades-old mystery that Monterey guarded fiercely. Together, they understood that their investigation was only beginning, and that beneath the peaceful, fog-covered surface, something powerful waited patiently for their discovery. The morning sunlight strained through the dense Monterey fog, illuminating Lauren Bennett's quaint bookstore in soft, hesitant streaks of gold. Dylan Carter and Emma Cruz stood silently among the shelves lined with aging volumes, the scent of worn paper and wood polish enveloping them. Something about this place felt strangely sacred, a sanctuary of memories that Lauren had carefully tended for years. Almost like a gardener nurturing the fragile blossoms of her past, Lauren watched the detectives with quiet apprehension, her delicate fingers nervously tracing the edge of the wooden counter. Emma noticed her unease, understanding the silent burden Lauren had carried since Edward's disappearance. Dylan broke the silence first, clearing his throat lightly, his voice gentle, almost apologetic. "Lauren," Dylan began, "we've found something troubling. A photograph at George Ramsey's bar with Edward's handwriting on the back. We believe there might be more, perhaps something Edward left here, hidden in the safety of your books." Lauren's eyes widened briefly, then softened, surrendering to the inevitability she'd feared since the day Edward vanished. She nodded silently, stepping toward a small, beautifully carved cabinet near the corner of the shop. Kneeling down, she unlocked the cabinet with trembling hands, pulling out a delicate box wrapped carefully in faded silk. With a solemn hesitation, she placed it on the counter between them. "He said this was only for emergencies," she whispered, her voice barely audible, filled with a fragile regret. Dylan gently opened the box, revealing a bundle of letters bound together by a worn leather cord. Each envelope was yellowed edges, brittle with age, as if holding back secrets desperate to spill free. Emma carefully untied the cord and opened the first letter. Her eyes quickly scanned Edward's familiar handwriting, the words sharp, decisive words written by a man who trusted no one. The letters spoke cryptically of suspicions within the CIA, names hidden in codes, references to meetings held under moonless skies, and whispers of compromised operations. Edward had clearly believed someone was betraying not only him, but the entire fabric of their national security. The gravity of the revelations filled the air, heavy and suffocating, drawing silence among the trio. Lauren's face tightened in pain, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes as decades of suppressed doubts surfaced. "He changed so much before he disappeared," she confessed softly, her voice strained with sorrow. "He grew distant, guarded, obsessed with secrecy. Sometimes he would wake in the night, terrified of something he couldn't or wouldn't share with me." Dylan listened sympathetically, offering a reassuring nod. Emma remained silently observant, reading carefully through each letter, piecing together fragments of a puzzle Edward himself had left unfinished. Lauren continued, her voice gaining strength with each painful memory shared. "I blamed myself for years, thinking perhaps I had driven him away, that perhaps my love wasn't enough. I spent countless nights agonizing over small moments, tiny details, words I should have said, silences I should have broken." Dylan offered a gentle smile. "Lauren, Edward's choices were never your fault. Secrets like these weigh heavily. They change people, like dough left too long in the oven. It hardens beyond recognition, beyond its intended form." Emma raised an eyebrow, quietly amused yet moved by Dylan's metaphor. Lauren, despite herself, managed a soft, grateful smile, feeling slightly comforted by his warmth. The revelations from the letters forced Dylan and Emma to return to George, Ramsey's bar, where secrets seemed to linger beneath every creaking floorboard and behind every bottle of aged whiskey. Ramsey greeted them warily, sensing that this meeting was different. Emma placed the letters firmly on the bar counter, challenging him with a direct stare. "You knew, George," Emma said kindly but firmly. "You knew Edward was investigating espionage, betrayal within the CIA. These letters name operations, places, times. Tell us the truth. What was your role in this?" Ramsey's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing defensively. Dylan stepped forward, diffusing the rising tension with his characteristic blend of humor and diplomacy. "George, listen. We're not here to grill you like a cheap steak. But Edward trusted you, confided in you. The truth will come out sooner or later. Better to season it yourself before someone else serves it up raw." Ramsey eyed Dylan skeptically, though his defenses began to crack, softened by Dylan's honest appeal. He sighed deeply, pouring himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling thoughtfully as he spoke. "Edward knew too much," Ramsey admitted slowly, bitterness thickening his words. "He had evidence, hard evidence, that someone at the top was involved in dealings darker than you can imagine. He discovered the trail and followed it obsessively, gathering proof quietly, meticulously. But when he realized how high the corruption reached, he knew he was no longer safe. He confided in me, trusted me, because I had connections, ways to keep him hidden." Ramsey's voice trembled slightly, betraying emotions he'd kept buried for decades. Dylan and Emma remained silent, their attention unwavering, encouraging him gently. "But it became dangerous for both of us," Ramsey continued, voice weary. "Edward was certain they would silence him permanently. I helped him stage his disappearance. It was supposed to be temporary. But days became weeks, months, years, and Edward vanished completely, even from me. The gravity of Ramsey's confession hung thick in the air, heavy with implications neither detective was prepared to fully process. Emma leaned forward, persistent, determined. Who were these people, George? We need specifics. Edward deserves justice. Ramsey shook his head slowly, sadness and frustration battling across his rugged face. I've told you all I can. Some truths are better buried. If you keep digging, you'll find more than answers. You'll find darkness you can't escape. Emma's jaw tightened stubbornly, but Dylan intervened again, this time softly, respectfully. We understand, George. But some secrets demand light, no matter how uncomfortable. Edward's journey didn't end 28 years ago. It continues now, through us. Ramsey laughed bitterly, eyes glistening with regret. You're idealistic. Fools, both of you. Brave, but fools nonetheless. Dylan shrugged lightly, the familiar humor returning. I've been called worse, George, usually by my partner here. Emma rolled her eyes, allowing herself a brief smile despite the tension. Her appreciation for Dylan's gentle easing of the situation evident. Ramsey sighed deeply, seemingly resigned, his voice lowering to a murmur. Edward was obsessed with poetry because it gave him strength, Ramsey revealed quietly. He saw truth in poetry's ambiguity, layers within layers, meaning hidden within. Shadows. That was Edward, always seeking truths hidden behind illusions. Emma nodded thoughtfully, understanding a bit more about the man who had become the center of their investigation. Dylan gathered the letters carefully, knowing their importance extended far beyond evidence. They represented Edward's final voice, his legacy, his courage in facing truths others had desperately buried. As they turned to leave, Ramsey called after them, his voice thick with unresolved grief. Be careful. Monterey keeps secrets deeper than any ocean trench. Don't underestimate how far some will go to protect them. Outside, Dylan and Emma stood quietly beneath the gray Monterey sky, the weight of Ramsey's revelation settling heavily. Emma glanced at Dylan, her expression stern yet determined. We're close, she murmured softly, closer than we've ever been. Dylan nodded solemnly, feeling an uncharacteristic seriousness wash over him. And yet, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface. Emma sighed softly, eyes distant yet resolute. Then we keep digging until we uncover the truth Edward Bennett was willing to disappear for. The mist rolled in gently, cloaking the town once again in secrecy, as if Monterey itself listened silently to their conversation. And somewhere beyond sight, Edward Bennett's truth waited patiently, ready to surface when the time was right. The fog in Monterey seemed heavier now, as if sensing the tension that had quietly taken root within its familiar streets. For Dylan and Emma, each clue led only to deeper questions, turning their investigation into an intricate maze of shadows, secrets, and half-truths. The letters they had uncovered spoke in cryptic whispers, pulling them from abandoned warehouses near Cannery Row to quiet cottages overlooking Camel Bay, always hinting at truths that stayed stubbornly beyond reach. One chilly evening, the detectives found themselves following an elusive lead along Fisherman's Wharf. A tip from an anonymous caller had promised answers hidden inside an old fishing shack. Dylan, with his usual optimism, quipped lightly, Feels like we're chasing ghosts, Emma. Ghosts who've forgotten their lines halfway through the play. Emma, her eyes focused sharply, replied dryly, Well, let's hope one of them remembers. The ending. They cautiously approached the weathered building, creaking boards beneath their feet, echoing softly into the night. The shack was abandoned, heavy with the pungent scent of fish and salt. Inside, dusty crates and discarded fishing gear cluttered the floor, shadows dancing under their flashlights. Suddenly, a noise startled them, a sharp creak from the floorboards above. Dylan exchanged a quick tense glance with Emma, their hearts pounding. Together, they raced up the narrow staircase, Emma's sharp commands cutting through the darkness. But their flashlight beams caught only a startled cat fleeing through a cracked window, leaving behind nothing but frustration and nervous laughter from Dylan. Well, he said breathlessly. At least someone got some exercise tonight. Emma sighed deeply, shaking her head, her smile reluctant yet present. Another dead end, another step deeper into confusion. Their nights became filled with similar chases, shadows turning into nothingness, informants who never appeared, trails dissolving under scrutiny. Amid the endless nights of frustration, memories of Edward began to surface like quiet ghosts from the past. Flashbacks unfolded in whispers, delicate and poignant. One evening, as Dylan reviewed Edward's letters, he imagined vividly a younger Edward sitting at a desk beneath dim lamplight, scribbling anxiously about ethical dilemmas, troubled by dark revelations within the very agency he'd sworn to serve. Edward's meticulous handwriting described meetings and secret locations, his voice captured in ink heavy with moral turmoil. Integrity, Edward had written in one letter, is not something you wear like a coat, to discard when inconvenient. It's etched in bone, deeper than duty, deeper than loyalty itself. Dylan felt a profound respect grow within him, understanding Edward's torment and the courage it took to challenge the shadows around him. The relentless investigation finally led Emma to stumble upon confidential CIA files buried deep within the archive room of the Monterey police station. Files yellowed with age revealed detailed notes of clandestine meetings along the coastal cliffs, meetings Edward himself had painstakingly documented. These documents explicitly mentioned illegal operations involving high-ranking officials, trading secrets and weapons, orchestrated quietly beneath the agency's watchful eye. Emma's pulse quickened as she read Edward's detailed descriptions. The cliffside rendezvous had taken place repeatedly, shielded by Monterey's thick fog and crashing waves, ideal cover for treasonous dealings. Emma and Dylan retraced these coordinates carefully, finding themselves drawn repeatedly to the isolated beaches and perilous cliffs that Edward had described so vividly. One particularly chilling night, following the documented clues, Dylan and Emma found themselves near the windswept cliffs south of Point Lobos. The ocean roared fiercely. Below, waves battering the rocks relentlessly, mirroring their own frustration. Dylan humorously commented, "This case is like my grandmother's stew. There's always another mysterious ingredient lurking beneath the surface." Emma shot him an affectionate but exasperated glance, shaking her head. Even amid tension, Dylan's ability to lighten their spirits remained constant. Suddenly, headlights flashed briefly in the distance, startling them. A car sped away rapidly from a hidden cove below, tires kicking up gravel in its haste. Dylan sprinted towards their own vehicle, Emma close behind. A tense, high-speed pursuit ensued along the coastal road, winding dangerously through the night. Dylan maneuvered skillfully, adrenaline fueling them. But as they finally cornered the fleeing car, disappointment surged again. The driver was merely a frightened teenager caught in a late-night escapade, unaware of the gravity his reckless joyride had caused. Their hope faded quickly into weary frustration. Emma slumped back in the passenger seat, voice thick with exhaustion. "We keep chasing shadows, Dylan. I'm beginning to think Monterey doesn't want us to find the truth." Dylan reached across, gently squeezing her shoulder in reassurance. "The truth wants to be found, Emma. It's just playing hard to get." Returning to their cramped office, they resumed their painstaking search through Edward's letters and the newly discovered documents. Hours melted away, coffee cups filled and refilled, eyes aching with fatigue. Suddenly, Dylan sat up abruptly, eyes fixated on a faded map tucked among Edward's papers, one they'd overlooked before. Emma leaned in curiously. The map showed Monterey's coastline, marked carefully by Edward's precise handwriting, indicating key locations they'd visited. But a particular mark stood out clearly, a faint symbol carefully penciled near a remote area of coastline, rarely visited, barely accessible by land. Dylan traced it gently with his fingertip. "Look at this, Emma," he whispered urgently. "Edward marked something here. It has to mean something significant." Emma studied it carefully, feeling a sudden surge of excitement tempered by caution. "It looks like a hidden cove, an area that's deliberately hard to reach. she murmured. Thoughtfully, eyes narrowing in concentration, Dylan's voice filled with newfound determination. Edward wouldn't mark this unless it mattered deeply. Maybe this is where the final answers lie, where he intended us to go all along. Emma glanced at Dylan, seeing renewed hope spark in his eyes, the fatigue momentarily fading away. If Edward went this far, risking everything to document this location, she agreed firmly, then we owe it to him, to ourselves, to find out why. Together, they traced routes along the coastline, mapping out their approach carefully. Dylan's voice softened, thoughtful. Edward wasn't just investigating treason. He was fighting to protect something deeper, wasn't he? His integrity, his very soul was at stake. Emma nodded solemnly, respect deepening further. That's what made him dangerous to those who betrayed everything he stood for. He wasn't afraid to shine a light into their darkness. As night slowly yielded to dawn outside their window, Dylan and Emma understood clearly that they had reached a turning point. The obscure coastal mark Edward had left behind was more than just a clue. It represented his unwavering determination. His quiet courage against overwhelming darkness. Monterey, with its endless mist and guarded silence, had kept Edward's secrets well, protecting them fiercely beneath its calm exterior. Yet Edward had believed profoundly that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always resurfaced. And Dylan and Emma, sensing Edward's unwavering resolve guiding them, now felt closer than ever to unveiling that hidden truth. Together, they gazed down at the worn map, its cryptic mark illuminated softly by the growing daylight. Both knew instinctively that the hidden cove Edward had marked held secrets deeper than they imagined, answers that Monterey's fog could no longer conceal. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and revelations yet unseen. But for Dylan and Emma, stepping forward was no longer merely their duty. It was an act of justice, courage, and redemption for Edward Bennett's sacrifice. The waves crashed rhythmically below, whispering quiet encouragement. Dylan smiled gently, confidence returning with dawn's arrival. "Ready, Emma?" he asked softly. Emma's gaze hardened resolutely, determination etched clearly in her expression. Ready. Together, they moved forward, stepping boldly into the unknown, guided only by the lingering courage of a man who had risked everything to reveal the truth hidden within shadows. The cliffs rose sharply against the dimming Monterey sky, ancient and unmoving, guardians of secrets older than the sea itself. Dylan and Emma stood at the edge of the narrow path, the wind tugging insistently at their jackets as they looked down toward the cove below. They had followed Edward's carefully marked map, and now they were here, at the brink of answers that had remained buried beneath layers of fog and forgotten memories for decades. The rocky descent was treacherous, each step a careful negotiation with gravity. Waves thundered against the rocks below, their relentless rhythm echoing the investigators' heartbeats, quickened by anticipation. Dylan led the way, flashlight casting uncertain beams ahead, while Emma followed cautiously, senses alert, muscles taut with apprehension. At the bottom, barely visible through a dense veil of hanging moss and ivy, they finally discovered the mouth of the hidden cave. It seemed impossibly small, more like a scar in the rock than an actual entrance. Dylan hesitated momentarily, humor masking his unease as he whispered, "You know, Emma, caves are like relationships. Sometimes you don't realize how tight things can get until you're already in." Emma rolled her eyes, her dry retort instantly calming her nerves. Only you could romanticize getting stuck in a hole in a cliff. Smiling despite the tension, Dylan carefully parted the thick curtain of vines and slipped inside. Emma followed, immediately feeling the air close in around her, heavy and damp, tinged with the scent of salt and earth. The space was narrow, the walls wet and glistening, pressing in claustrophobically as if the very earth sought to protect whatever lay hidden within. Moving cautiously, flashlights illuminating only fragments of darkness, Dylan and Emma slowly advanced deeper. The cave widened gradually, opening into a larger chamber filled with shadows and the quiet drip of water echoing softly from unseen corners. At the chamber's far side, their beams illuminated something astonishing, a rough wooden desk, weathered, yet sturdy, littered with documents, faded photographs, maps, and handwritten notes yellowed by time. Emma's breath quickened as she stepped closer, reaching out tentatively to touch the scattered papers. Her flashlight trembled slightly, heart racing with the realization that Edward Bennett himself had sat in this very spot. Working tirelessly, isolated, hidden from the world. Dylan moved alongside her, eyes scanning the room in disbelief. "Emma," he whispered, voice thick with awe. Edward was here. He survived all this time. They sifted through the carefully preserved documents, each discovery more startling than the last. Detailed notes on the corrupt network within the CIA, photographs of clandestine meetings, names meticulously listed beside cryptic codes, all arranged in Edward's distinctive handwriting. Each page bore witness to his endless search for truth, his unwavering fight against betrayal. Among the documents, Dylan's gaze landed on an aged photograph, Edward, younger, smiling gently alongside Lauren in front of their home, a rare glimpse of happiness. Dylan felt his throat tighten at the teeth. Thought of what Edward had sacrificed, hiding away for decades to protect both his family and his principles. Emma, noticing his silence, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, sharing the emotional weight of their discovery. As they continued exploring, the cavern seemed almost alive with whispers of the past. A cot with faded blankets lay tucked against the wall, neatly arranged despite its obvious age. Small personal items, a battered pocket watch, a carefully preserved collection of poetry books revealed Edward's determined effort to maintain his humanity. Even as isolation threatened to strip it away, the atmosphere became increasingly oppressive. The cave's silence broken only by their quiet breathing and the distant murmur of waves filtering through the stone. Dylan suddenly spoke, attempting levity despite the weight pressing upon them. "You know, Emma, I imagined Edward's secret hideaway would be a bit cozier, perhaps with a mini-fridge or at least an armchair." Emma, absorbed in documents, responded dryly, "I think you'd make terrible company after 3 decades of solitude." Edward chose wisely. Dylan chuckled softly, grateful for Emma's presence, her steady sarcasm an anchor amid the mounting revelations. But their brief humor quickly faded, replaced by quiet reverence as they continued searching, each discovery deepening their respect for Edward's solitary courage. Emma's attention abruptly sharpened as she pulled another paper from beneath a pile of maps. It detailed meticulously planned meetings along the coastline, cryptic notes about CIA contacts, and precise timelines. Yet, at the bottom, a hastily scribbled annotation caught her attention. "They're close. Running out of time." Her pulse quickened. The note was dated only days earlier. "Dylan," she whispered urgently, eyes wide with shock. "This note Edward wrote it less than a week ago." Dylan turned abruptly, confusion and disbelief etched across his face. "Then, he's alive. Edward is still here." Before either could fully grasp the implications, a faint noise echoed softly through the cave. Both turned sharply, hearts pounding, flashlights casting frantic beams around the darkened chamber. Silence hung thickly, tension coiled tighter. By each passing second, then, softly at first, a voice emerged from the shadows, a voice worn thin by solitude and time, yet unmistakably clear. "It's been so long since I've heard my name spoken aloud." The voice, fragile yet steady, filled the cave with a presence both haunting and profoundly human. Dylan and Emma froze, shock rendering them speechless, until Dylan finally managed a tentative, almost reverent whisper. "Edward Bennett." From the deepest shadows, a figure moved slowly forward, hesitant steps revealing a man transformed by years of isolation. Edward Bennett emerged, older, his once dark hair now starkly white, his eyes deep with unspoken sadness, yet burning with quiet dignity. He wore layers of worn clothing, patched and faded, yet carried himself with an unmistakable strength, fragile yet fiercely alive. Emma stepped forward instinctively, her voice trembling slightly. "Edward, you're alive." Edward's gaze softened, warmth briefly overcoming decades of guarded solitude. "Alive, yes," he responded quietly, "though sometimes it feels more like surviving within a shadow." Dylan moved closer, overcome by a mix of awe and empathy. "Why did you stay hidden all these years, Edward?" Edward's eyes glistened briefly, his voice a blend of pain and determination. "The truths I uncovered were dangerous, Dylan. My existence threatened powerful people who would stop at nothing to bury those truths permanently. Hiding was not a choice. It was necessity." Silence settled heavily between them, understanding bridging decades of separation. Dylan finally broke the quiet gently, his voice filled with profound respect. "Edward, we came here searching for you, but also for the truth you sacrificed everything to protect." Edward nodded slowly, eyes shining with gratitude yet heavy with the burden of secrets carried alone. "Then perhaps it's finally time. Time for truth to rise from the shadows." Outside, night had fallen fully, Monterey's familiar mist descending again, wrapping the cliffs and ocean in quiet secrecy. Yet within the hidden cave, darkness receded slowly before Edward's courage, Dylan's determination, and Emma's unwavering resolve. Here, amid shadows and revelations, past and present finally converged, preparing to unveil secrets that had lingered far too long beneath Monterey's protective fog. Edward Bennett stood quietly in the gentle gloom of his hidden refuge, his fragile presence still radiating an undeniable dignity. Dylan and Emma waited patiently, aware that the words Edward was about to share had been suppressed beneath decades of silence, solitude, and fear. Edward drew a deep breath, gathering strength from somewhere deep within, and finally began to speak, his voice quiet but unwavering. "When I joined the CIA," he began softly, eyes distant, as if tracing footsteps through his past, "I believed deeply in our mission, in duty and loyalty. I saw our work as the quiet shield protecting the innocent, invisible yet essential. But the deeper I went, the more I saw how easily power can corrupt even the best intentions." He paused momentarily, memories shadowing his eyes. Dylan and Emma remained respectfully silent, letting Edward's story unfold naturally, knowing each word carried immense weight. It started subtly, whispers of irregularities, operations not sanctioned, resources diverted without clear purpose. At first, I dismissed these anomalies as bureaucratic inefficiencies. But soon, patterns emerged, operations concealed within operations, agents disappearing or reassigned without explanation. Innocent lives lost without justification or remorse. Edward's voice grew stronger, fueled by a resolve that decades of hiding hadn't diminished. I began my own investigation quietly, discreetly gathering evidence of corruption that reached into the highest corridors of power. Weapons being trafficked illegally, intelligence deliberately compromised, even allies betrayed. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. Powerful men who had once called me friend, became shadows at my back. Emma listened intently, feeling a chill at the raw depth of betrayal Edward described. Dylan's expression darkened, grasping the immense courage Edward had shown in confronting such profound corruption alone. Edward continued, voice now tinged with a poignant sadness. "Eventually, my investigation drew attention I could no longer evade. I knew my days were numbered unless I vanished. I had to protect not just myself, but Lauren too. If they had known she shared my secrets, they would have destroyed us both. So I disappeared, trusting only Ramsey, who reluctantly helped me stage the scene at Bixby Creek, hoping to protect Lauren by convincing them I was gone for good." He paused, emotion breaking through momentarily. "For nearly 3 decades, I lived buried alive, here in shadows, bound by duty and guilt, longing every day for freedom, but knowing discovery meant death." Edward stepped forward slowly, handing Dylan a carefully prepared bundle of documents. Meticulously gathered over the years, indisputable proof of the betrayal he'd fought so fiercely. Dylan took them gently, reverently, sensing the magnitude of what Edward was finally entrusting to them. The days that followed unfolded quickly. Truths Edward had sacrificed so much to preserve finally emerging into the light. Dylan and Emma, driven by profound respect and determination, presented Edward's evidence to trusted authorities beyond the compromised channels. Slowly, cautiously, arrests began. Prominent names brought low by undeniable proof. Corruption that had metastasized quietly beneath the veneer of national security finally excised. As Monterey absorbed these dramatic revelations, a quiet sense of justice spread softly through the town. The fog seemed lighter, as though the very air had grown easier to breathe. Truth lifting the oppressive weight of secrets that had pressed invisibly upon every street and home. Edward and Lauren's reunion unfolded quietly on the misty Monterey shore. She trembled as he emerged from the fog, older and frail but still standing tall. Years of grief melted away as they moved toward each other. His apology met not with blame, but with love that had endured through silence and absence. Their embrace, tender and long overdue, closed decades of pain under the watchful fog. From a distance, Dylan and Emma witnessed the moment with quiet respect, reflecting on the sacrifices Edward had made and the resilience love and truth demand. Monterey slowly returned to its rhythms, the bookstore reopening, the bar alive with quiet talk, and Edward moving once more among his people with humility and dignity. On a calm morning, he walked hand in hand with Lauren along the shoreline, their silhouettes fading into the mist. The ocean whispered softly around them, as if carrying away the last of the secrets, leaving only peace and the reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always returns with the tide.